Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to The Should Life. This is your host, Jessica Lee Labe, and today we're talking about aligned action. Let's get into it. Hello, gorgeous. How are you doing? Welcome back to another episode. Today we are talking about aligned action. Sorry about that. You may notice that I'm feeling a little under the weather today. My voice may be a little creaky, maybe a little squeaky, but it feels really aligned for me to get on and talk to you. So I am taking action from a place of alignment. Hello, perfect timing. Am I right? Okay. So let's talk about alignment because I see a lot of people talking about living in alignment, what it means to be in alignment with their business or just like being in a state of alignment. And it's funny how some terms or like spiritual words or phrases can get kind of like co-opt and all of a sudden you're going to like see it all over the place, like good vibes, right? Like all of a sudden good vibes was on t-shirts and um like all kinds of like paraphernalia. Well, I feel like alignment is kind of like the next thing. And I see a lot of people talking about alignment, but I'm not completely clear on what it is that they are aligning to. And we have to get really clear. Hello, we have to get really clear about what the fuck we're actually aligning to if we're going to first talk about alignment and if we're going to take action from a place of alignment. Otherwise, it's like, what am I aligning to? Like, because if you're aligning to your mind, if you think that your mind is you, if you think that your fears and your anxieties and your like obsessions and your ruminations are you, and you're going to try to align to that, just saying, like, oh, well, I'm just going to live in alignment with who I think I am, then we have some problems. Okay. That's going to result in definitely living the should life and a lot of confusion, disappointment, chaos. So let's get really clear on what I mean. I mean, I can only speak for myself. What I mean when I say alignment, because I talk about taking aligned action and I talk about being in alignment. So, what do I mean when I say that? When I say alignment, I mean alignment to your inner voice, alignment to your soul, your higher self, God within you, your inner knowing, your intuition. So when I say alignment, that is what I'm talking about. And when we talk about aligned action, please notice that I'm not saying like alignment is first in that phrase. It's aligned action. Alignment to your inner voice will always, always, always come first. What's going on? If you're interested in one-on-one mentorship with me or your own live inner voice session to activate your intuition and get you living your soul-aligned life, head over to nomoreshouldlife.com and let's get started. So, the aligned action part of my teaching framework is super important because it can be really easy to assume that what I teach is all surrender and all flow without the action steps. And this can be part of the reason why the mind may start to really, really resist this work as well. Because the mind is very action focused. It's like, okay, what's the goal? What's the objective? What are we striving for? How can we take action? But good news, minds, I'm talking to you. You can take a breath. You can breathe easy because that's not what I'm saying. Okay. There is absolutely a time and a place for action. And the key is for your actions to actually be aligned. So if we allow the mind to run the show, we're just taking action just to take action. We're just like on this spinning hamster wheel, but the mind feels like, this is great. We're making progress simply because we're taking action. This is not true. Just because we're taking action doesn't mean that we're getting anywhere. It may mean that we're just running ourselves ragged. It may mean that we're actually like really bored and exhausted. And the last thing that we should, quote unquote, be doing is taking action. So, this shift from taking action from the mind's perspective and taking aligned action will make all of the difference. Okay, so I want to actually use I just got married. I'm like, oh my gosh, just beyond. I'm actually just floating on cloud 9. Um the last like 10 days have been hands down the best 10 days of my entire life. But I can't help but reflect on how I got to this place where I was able to actually be in such a healthy relationship and get married. And this topic of aligned action is very, very timely when it comes to this because when I was single, um, I I visualized myself like when I decided, okay, I'm ready to start dating. I visualized myself sitting, across from my ideal partner. And it was like, what do I want their life to look like? What do I want them to like embody? And what I wanted was someone who like had a sense of humor, someone who loved their job. It didn't matter what they did, but if you've ever been around someone who's just really passionate about their work, it it lights up their space and it lights up everyone around them. That was really important to me. Someone who had passions of their own, someone who had hobbies, someone who like had a thriving social life and wasn't just constantly searching for someone to complete them. Like someone who was very comfortable being on their own and lived like truly, truly like embodied that. Someone who was like at peace with that, wasn't trying to rush the timeline. And when I thought about this person, I also kind of turned that camera on myself and visualized them staring back at me. And me sitting there and realizing I don't have, I'm not embodying all these traits that I want my future partner to have. Like, I didn't really, like, I hadn't fully activated, I hadn't fully aligned to this person that I wanted to be. And so I realized that I could actually not start dating. I didn't want to start dating until I had completely become the person that I wanted to be sitting across from that table. This is where I started. I went into yoga teacher training and I met a bunch of like amazing people. I started a nonprofit with one of my best friends. I started talking more openly about my eating disorder recovery. Um, I started my certification for mind body eating coaching and really started to put myself out there. And what I realized is that I really started to fucking love my life on my own. Like it was no longer, the goal was no longer to find a partner. The goal was just like, oh my gosh, how can I continue to feel this amazing and this full in my life? Now, a big part of that, when I decided, okay, I'm ready. I feel like I'm really becoming this version of myself that I can be really proud of and is ready to invite in someone else who can not complete me, but can add to that, can add to my life. Like I was ready for that. What I needed to do when I decided I was ready to start dating is make sure that um I was very intentional about taking aligned action when it came to dating. And As I mentioned earlier, the key here is that first we are in alignment before we take any action. The alignment is to the feeling, not necessarily to the outcome. In a previous episode, I break this down and I talked about it in terms of like finding a new job. Here, we're going to talk about it in terms of dating. So, what is the feeling that I wanted to feel with my ideal partner? I wanted to feel like I could be my fully expressed self. I wanted to feel like I wasn't like doubting myself or suffocating myself or quieting myself down. I wanted to feel like I was heard. I wanted to feel like I could trust this other person. I wanted to feel like there was just this really safe container for me to be my chaotic, witchy, neurotic self. And so, first, before I took any action, this is so key. Before I took any action, before I opened the dating apps, before I texted with anyone, before I did any swiping, I first got aligned to the state of being that I wanted to be in, that I wanted to exist in. So I first aligned to that. And then from that state of being, I took action. That's when I would respond to people. That's what I would when I would actually go on dates. That's when I would actually swipe. That's when I would even open the app. Okay. Now the other big part of aligned action is releasing the outcome, because the mind is going to cling to an outcome. It's like, okay, we're going into a date. What is the goal? The goal is to get a second date. Okay, we're going into a second date. The goal is to get a third date. Okay, now the goal is to like actually be in a relationship with someone. But can you see how that then disregards your own authenticity and your own fully expressed self, your soul aligned life? Because if you're allowing the mind to guide those decisions, you're just going to find yourself, and I did this like, oh my gosh, I did this in so many relationships, is I just molded myself to be a version of me that I thought that he wanted. And then like 2 years go by and I find, wait a minute, like he doesn't even like the real me. He doesn't even fucking know the real me. Do I know the real me? The answer was no. So this is releasing the outcome. They're releasing the outcome that the mind is going to cling to. So what does that mean? That means walking into every date connected to my authentic energy, connected and aligned to my inner voice, and knowing I would visualize myself leaving the date and being like, at the end of the day, I stayed true to myself. And so I feel good about that. You know, I can go home to this beautiful life I've created for myself, not necessarily not attached to if he's going to text me again, because I feel good about it because I was my true self. This is such a huge part of aligned action, and it's also very difficult for the mind. But if we stay connected to the inner voice throughout this entire process, throughout our aligned action process, it becomes like flow. It becomes easy. Okay, so that was a little story about utilizing aligned action when it comes to dating. This also applies, I mean, aligned action applies to every aspect of our life because the mind is always going to want us to take action. And the inner voice keeps guiding us back to alignment. So when it comes to like work or life, or if you're building a business, there are certainly times when we need to work, when maybe the work calls for us to like grind and connect with others and really hustle to create and put our work out into this world. And our inner voice, if we allow it, will guide us to the people and the places that are perfect for what we need at that time. So The inner voice, like, it's easy to assume that the inner voice is, if we allow it to guide our everyday life, is going to guide us to just be like napping all day and being outside all day and looking at the clouds, and like nothing is ever happening. That's why the mind can be so resistant to this work. But it's actually not true. But we do have to loosen that grip that the mind has on us to allow ourselves to experience what it is to take aligned action, which means we have to allow the space to even get into alignment with the inner voice in the first place. So, getting in alignment or even planning in alignment is key before we start to take any action. Now, the inner voice may guide you to take action. And this is like so fun because the way that the inner voice may guide your action, the energy around it is going to feel different than the action from the mind. The action from the mind is going to feel like desperation. It's going to feel very attached. It's going to feel like this is life or death. But the action that's taken from a place of alignment is going to feel freaking fun. It's going to feel like curiosity. It's going to feel like play. Like there's such a light energy to the inner voice's guidance. It's such a beautiful, beautiful place to take action. What if you could go about your work, your grinding, your hustling from a place of play and fun and curiosity and lightness? Can you sense the difference of how you're going to feel in that experience? You're still taking action, but because you're aligned to the feeling you desire, because you're aligned to the inner voice, it's going to feel fun. Wow. I was excited about this episode and it did not let me down. I'm so glad I took this aligned action and recorded this podcast with you today because this was exactly what I needed. So, we talked about what alignment actually looks like, what I mean when I talk about alignment, um, what aligned action looked like in my world in terms of dating, and how we need to release the outcome that the mind may be clinging to. And we talked about the energetic difference between taking action from a place of alignment versus taking action from the mind. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. This is your reminder that you are enough, you are worthy, and you are loved. You can find me over at Instagram at Jessica Lee Labe and my website at nomoreshouldlife.com. If you or someone you love is a high-achieving woman looking to activate your inner voice and embrace your shadow self to claim your soul-aligned life, send me a DM and let's do this.